district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT DiSTRiCT, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up, Fantasyland? Welcome back to the GOAT DiSTRiCT. Welcome back to my boy Dan. We're back for week 11 live via the Player Profiler Network like we do every Tuesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. We are excited to have you guys joining us tonight. Hopefully the live chat will get lit like it always does. Get some questions, some comments. We love having you guys join us. Smash that like button. Guys, we have a ton to get to. Dan, you're fresh from the bush. You can elaborate on that if you want. But we have so much to talk about, man. Just today, like we were looking at the show sheet and a couple things happened. We had to kind of throw in there. A lot happening in the NFL, a lot happening in fantasy, contending teams, getting ready, sharpening our tools as we get into the crucial weeks. Dan, how excited are you for that and for tonight's big show?
Show and everything, because I've spent like the past 10 days spending too little time thinking about fantasy football and too much time doing other things. I don't know. I may have to go back to work. I'm not sure if I have enough time to be retired right now. It's been a whirlwind. I was in Texas last weekend, then I immediately came home from that, went deer hunting, and then immediately came home for that, and went to Chicago for a concert. So just arrived back from that this afternoon. So, but I spent the rest of the afternoon getting back into the fantasy football. I'm ready to roll. So I'm looking forward to this a lot.
Nice. Let's jump right into it. Let's start a little macro. We're coming off of a big weekend, especially in the AFC North. I feel like, Dan, this has been the division of topic du jour, as we say, since probably the offseason. Just how competitive we thought it would be. And it definitely has not failed us yet. The only division, I believe, Nick Carnes says the AFC North remains the only division in football to have 0 losing records. You got 7-3 Ravens, 6-3, 6-3 with the Browns and the Steelers, and then the Bengals 5-4. Dan, who's your favorite to win this division this year?
Yeah, so I think as far as winning the division, I would throw out Pittsburgh, because they feel like almost the winning record feels fake almost. Their offense isn't that great. Their defense has been keeping them in games for sure. Big defensive plays have been doing it for them, but that's a tough way to go through an entire season. So Cleveland, I just until or unless Watson gets it together, it's hard to back them as well. Even though they did just beat the Ravens, but those kind of things will happen in these divisional matchups. So it kind of seems like it should be Cincinnati or Baltimore, but Baltimore's got such a big leg up on Cincinnati. Right now, I'm giving it to Baltimore. This is a huge game on Thursday night. Baltimore versus Cincy. Cincinnati lost the first one, so if Baltimore is able to beat them again, Baltimore's already up on them 2 games in the win column, 1 game in the loss column. So that would be almost a stranglehold versus Cincinnati. It would be tough for Cincy to come back against that. So Baltimore is my pick right now. It was concerning to see the way they let Cleveland come back on them, but I still think they're probably the most complete team. That defense is legit, and they've got some weapons on offense. Keaton Mitchell Keaton is heating, man.
Keaton is heating. Dan comes back with the swap. I love it. Keaton is heating. I'll get to Keaton in a sec. I got to go back to Pittsburgh though, because you kind of said it. Frank Schwab from Yahoo Sports points out 9 games straight that they've been outgained, but they're 6-3 for the Steelers. So it goes to show, it's kind of like when you look at targets under a receiver that hasn't had a touchdown in a while, like that kind of thing. Pittsburgh is due, I believe, to regress. As much as Tomlin, you got to love him as a coach. You got to love him ATS Pittsburgh overall. But again, like you said, because of the competitiveness of this division, probably the 4 spot right now, Cleveland, Watson, QB 19, Dan. I was looking at his stats. If you look at his stats versus last year, they're almost identical after 6 games because he played 6 games last year, 6 games this year. His stats are pretty much identical. Like he has not improved. The only improvement I saw was, I think, 2.5 with 3% improvement on his completion percentage, but that's about it, from like 58 to 61, something like that. Otherwise, yardage exactly the same, everything pretty much the same. But what matters most is the win-loss columns. He's lucky he's got that defense right now, right at 6-3. But I think we're on the same page here with Baltimore. Cincy just killed me. I had them in my survivor pool this week that I set up like weeks ago, and I just forgot to go back and check it this week. But yeah, that was a pretty painful one with them losing at home to Houston. The thing I got to say about that, Dan, you have to win that game at home. I know Houston is hot. I know they've got Stroud right now, and that team is looking legit. Like they're looking real legit. But Cincinnati in this division at home, you have to win that game.
I totally agree with you, and I think that probably one of the biggest problems is they were looking ahead to this Ravens game on Thursday night. They had the short turnaround. I think they kind of went in there thinking, Houston was a team they should be able to handle, and they just didn't. And and the only other thing I have to say is, apparently Deshaun Watson is a player who needs a lot of polishing, nearly constant polishing. Otherwise, he develops a big coating of rust. So apparently, now that he's no longer getting polished as often, it's a problem.
How do you expect me to keep a straight face after that? You talked about Keaton Mitchell. He definitely looks good. I mean, Gus, I was looking at Gus the Bus, RB1 from week 5 or week 7, I think it was. In the last 3 or 4 weeks anyways, he's the RB1. So you got to like that run game. Strength of schedule, you got to like Baltimore going into the back end of this season. We'll touch more on that. We're going to talk Bills, Dan. A lot of or pretty big movement in Buffalo after it. A really disappointing. I don't know. That's one way to look at it. But let's go to a quick word from our sponsors, and we will be right back to talk Buffalo Bills.
Oh, I see it every day online, every single day. Hey, that looks like a great fantasy team in an 8-team league. Oh, wish I could be in a league with you, right? Well, guess what? Now you can respond with, sure, let's play on Bettle. That's the beauty of this platform. This new Bettle platform standardizes all position scoring. So you just load your team and you challenge your friend, your colleague, Twitter troll, and you can browse other teams and issue challenges. Bettle is revolutionizing fantasy football. And with code Underworld, you get a $100 instant deposit match plus a free $10. So even if you deposit $20, you get $50. Think about that. So go to Bettle.com, the code is Underworld. Bettle.com, the code is Underworld, or click a link in the description. It's fun to be right.
And we're back. Dan, Ken Dorsey gets canned today after a loss to the Denver Broncos in primetime at home. A game you would think the Bills, as wonky as their season's been, would be able to close and get the W. The funny thing is, Josh Allen, when you look at it, he's QB2 right now, fantasy points per game, QB1 overall. Dan, we have him in the money league with Diggs, actually. But the offense just didn't seem to be clicking. They're 8th in points per game. But they're 5-5, Dan. At the end of the day, like we said earlier, it's all about the wins and losses, right? So how do you feel about it? Dorsey was the QB coach there for 3 seasons, and then the OC for 26 games. He went 18-8 when you're looking win-loss as the OC. How do you feel about the change in Buffalo? Should McDermott be worried? Is he on the hot seat? How do you feel about Buffalo rest of the season right now?
Yeah, so this is to me, it was a very, very odd firing. I get that they needed a fall guy. I guess that was Dorsey, but, Ken Dorsey did not turn the ball over 4 times last night. The rest of the offense did, and that's not something that you can lay at the feet of the offensive coordinator. Josh Allen has definitely had a lot more interceptions than usual this year. A lot of those, though, have been, clanging off of his receivers' hands and winding up in the hands of the defense. The Bills have been losing fumbles at a huge rate. Normally about 50% of the times you put the ball on the turf with a fumble, you get the ball back. The Bills are, I believe, under 25% of the time getting that ball back. And just dumb stuff like that is, it's variance. It's not really anything that you can hang your hat on or say, well, this is the offensive coordinator's fault or any other coach's fault. I think that's just comes down to players need to be focused a little bit more. And to me, that's a little bit more on the head coach than anybody else. So, if you're going to be blaming a coach, I guess I would be after the head coach a little bit more. But I think it's just kind of the sort of variance that can turn itself around during even the course of a season. I mean, you look at the Vikings; they were at one point 1-4. Now they're 6-4, and I think the Bills could easily have that same kind of a turnaround. I think they could have done it with Ken Dorsey or without Ken Dorsey. So I don't love the firing. I think it was just a dumb move. That was a move made for the sake of looking like you're doing something, but shouldn't have been done.
Yeah, they go up against Buffalo this week, and then they go Philly, at KC, at home against Dallas, at Chargers. So it gets you get a little break there, I guess, with the Chargers and New England, and then at Miami. So some tough matchups on the road, definitely for the Bills coming up. But you know what? Maybe a team in this situation sometimes better be on the road, Dan, for those big games. Kind of away from the craziness and more of that business trip type of approach.
Right, exactly. And also Denver's defense has been playing a lot better. I mean, we all have memories of that, 70-point Miami game that, they hung 70 points on the Denver defense. Denver defense has been a lot different since then. They've been shutting other teams down a lot more. So, I think this was just kind of the Bills not playing very well. Denver defense doing what it needed to do, Josh Allen did put the Bills up with just a couple minutes to go. And last I checked, he wasn't playing on defense, so I don't know that it was necessarily an offensive problem at all that cost him this game.
Yeah, it's almost like there's just you got to have the fall guy, right? And it ends
right.
up you kept hearing the comments that the Bills' offense is struggling. They're still top 10. Allen is still top, at his position. I know Diggs is smashing, except for when he's tweeting or doing whatever he's doing on the sidelines. Like these guys, you got to wonder, man. But anyways, let's. One other thing I want to ask you about was James Cook. I mean, we were high on James Cook coming into the season. He's been even last night, when he had the ball, other than that fumble. When he had the ball, he was the one guy that was making shit happen then. So do we give James Cook the ball more? Maybe now that, I guess when there's a new AC, how do you approach it? Are you just wait and see? You gravitating to talent? Is this like a buy low? What's your approach kind of with this change now? I know you're a more patient player, Dan.
Yeah, so James Cook, he looked great. The Denver defense, while they're a lot better against the pass, they are still pretty terrible against the run. And Cook really, he took himself out of the game for the first quarter and a half by fumbling on the first carry. So it was kind of understandable that he got benched for that, but it didn't seem to make Buffalo hang on to the ball any better. So, I think you got to keep feeding your best players. To me, the James Cook benching, sending a message, all that kind of stuff. It's just, again, I'm not sure how much effect that has. Nobody was kicking himself harder than Cook was, I'm sure, after that fumble. And could the Bills' offense have looked any better if they'd had him in there right away instead of sitting him on the bench for a quarter and a half? Overall, I think, this is probably a buying opportunity if anybody's down on the Bills' offense, and quite a few people are. Take a look and see if maybe you can grab a little bit of a discount on any of the major pieces in this offense. And, if you really have, some brass cojones, you can wait until after this week when they play the Jets, another super tough defense, and hope that the Bills' offense again struggles, and then go in there and swoop in and try to grab some pieces.
And it's kind of how you got to play that market, right, Dan? Like, it sounds simple, buy low, all that kind of stuff, sell high. But I feel like if you just follow that, especially Dynasty, especially if you're playing those Dynasty leagues, you and I made some splash moves this offseason when certain values were a little lower, and that's paying off during the season. So learning to see where player values are, don't go buy a guy after he goes off for 4 or 5 touchdowns. You know what I mean? With quarterbacks and superflex, that kind of thing.
Right.
Now, sorry, go ahead, Dan.
No, that was it. Just agreeing.
All right, Dan, we have I'm not going to lie, the thumbnail artwork is pretty sexy today. The dynamic duo, that's your brainchild there with the theme idea. We talk about stacking in the offseason, especially when you're drafting, but there are those dynamic duos right now that you either wish you had, you're happy you had. We're going to talk about those right now, Dan. I kind of pulled out the SOS, the strength of schedule, kind of week 11 to week 15 is kind of where I'm that sweet spot. So that's what I'm basing mine off of. I think you can see my list there. I'll let you start off. Maybe throw out one of your favorite that we can even talk about ones that have been of value till now. I think most people know, but do you have any nice stories of anything that's helped you till now, or who you like moving forward as, the top or one of the top dynamic duos?
Yeah, so let's start off by just kind of talking about there's, to me, a clear top 7 in wide receivers as far as what's happened so far. You can throw in a couple of tight ends with that, but if you look, Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Stephon Diggs, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, those guys are by far the top wide receivers. They are alphas in their offense, and as a group, they're doing a good 5 points or better than pretty much any other wide receiver in the game. So if you have one of those 7, that's helping you out a lot. If you've got 2 or 3 of those 7 somehow, oh my goodness, you are probably sitting at the very top of your league. If you're in a national contest, you're probably sitting at the top of that too. So those are great players to own, and it's just basically, this year we've seen a lot of alpha wide receivers really get incessantly targeted. In the past few years, I think we've seen more wide receiver 2s coming close, where it's like a wide receiver 1A, 1B type situation, and now we have some clear alpha wide receiver 1s going on. So if you've got one of those 7, I'm looking for them to continue. And just to kind of throw out one a little bit under the radar favorite, Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, I think, is a great one coming down the stretch, because Chase has got the second best strength of schedule remaining out of the wide receivers. Burrow, really since after week 4, he's been coming on. He's averaged 24.4 points basically in FFPC scoring, but he's been scoring well pretty much no matter what your scoring system is. And Jamar Chase has been doing the same. He's in the last 5 weeks, he's been averaging about 24.5 points. So, that's a duo that I think is going to continue. T. Higgins is sort of out of the way right now. They've got the great strength of schedule left the rest of the way. So I think that's a great one. As you were saying also, I think, Dak and CeeDee Lamb also has a very, very solid strength of schedule too. Why don't you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, I mean, Dak's been smashing the last 3 weeks, especially 28 plus points, 3 straight. Lamb obviously benefiting from that. It's nice to see Lamb, Dan, paying off. Like, he was going up there, and at first he was kind of like, man, he had a decent game, and then, but now you want these guys to smash. And when you have 2 of them together that can basically win you your week, as long as your other dudes get you double digits, I mean, that's a dynamic duo. I like the tight ends. I like a lot of these tight ends that have good schedules. Like, I talk about Baltimore, Lamar, and Andrews obviously are always going to be at the top of that list. Dobbs going to Minnesota, Dan. I bought Dobbs. Thought we'd talk about this later, but he's a guy I like buying in Superflex right now. I bought him for like a late second on a team where I have Cousins, as my QB3. Winning the league right now. Want to make sure I have at least a decent QB3 or 3 guys I can, mix and match. Dobbs is a guy I like, and then he's definitely, TJ Hawk, 11 targets, 30 some yards, whatever it was this weekend. I mean, you're not worried about the new quarterback coming in, right? He's leading on that tight end. And Addison, the last 5 weeks, Dan, wide receiver 5 right now. In the league that I'm looking at kind of the top performers from week 5 to week 10, he's been, not necessarily giving you JJ numbers, but he's given you some decent wide receiver 1 numbers from a guy that you didn't necessarily draft to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And how about Hawkinson? Not bad numbers from a guy whose snap count was supposed to be limited going into the game, right? And as a matter of fact, it actually was. But they had him out there on the passing downs, and guy's a warrior. He just he keeps going. So love to see that. I think that's a great point on Dobbs. In Dynasty, if you can get him for any sort of a second round pick, that's probably a good deal. And probably if you're doing that, you're buying him off somebody who's not competing, and that second round pick is going to do them better than Dobbs, and then Dobbs is going to do you better than your pick. So that's one of those nice deals that hopefully you can make pretty easily. No matter which side of that one you're sitting on.
The other team that I kind of like right now, a team I think most people like coming into the season, but we've really seen their young running back pick up, is Detroit. With Goff and Gibbs been leading the way at running back the last few weeks. Goff has, had a decent season. Laporta giving you more than you probably expected from the rookie tight end, and he's, you got to imagine, going to keep blossoming. And Detroit's got a decent schedule, especially for the quarterbacks and the tight ends, for the next 4 or 5 weeks here, Dan.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, the tight end schedule is fantastic. So Laporta, I think, could be a really strong tight end down the stretch. I mean, he's already a top 5 tight end, but he could really push himself up into the Hawkinson Kelsey area. If he gets hot during that time. And Gibbs, he's really kind of taken over that backfield. I'm not a fan of the, take away X run or whatever, but you take away that 75-yard run by David Montgomery, which is not, a usual run for him. And all of a sudden, Montgomery's stats look a lot worse. I mean, that doesn't make Gibbs look any better other than by comparison, but it just kind of would have given a little bit clearer picture of how the backfield has shifted towards Gibbs during the time that Montgomery was out. And I expect it to continue that way. I mean, I think Gibbs has really shown that he needs to get those touches, and he's electric with them. So I don't see any reason why the Lions would go away from that.
Yeah, we talk about opportunity, right, Dan, for running backs, and Gibbs got it, and he's got the talent, and they put in the draft capital. So you love seeing that from Gibbs. And Laporta. I mean, just Detroit overall, a young offense. Now they got Hawk there. Pittsburgh, an announcement today, Dan. We had kind of this scenario, actually. I think it's one of our fantasy pros, or I don't think it's a main, but you can correct me. both running backs in Pittsburgh, that was kind of tough to manage with Harris and Warren. Now Jalen Warren, supposedly the clear-cut starter now in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh 9th easiest strength of schedule RB, depending where you look, at least top 10, right? So it's decent. They're 20th-ish as a rushing offense, no matter where their stats are, they're usually in that range. 3rd worst in completion percentage, so it's not like they're going to lean on Pickett necessarily. Plus, it's getting into that winter, Dan, that Steelers winter football, that outdoor running the ball. I really like Jalen Warren right now, Dan, with this opportunity. How do you feel about it? Is Najee like a sneaky dynasty buy right now, just because he's kind of taking the backseat in Pittsburgh? How do you feel about Pittsburgh as a whole, and especially about the running game?
Yeah, so Pittsburgh, the main problem with either of these players is the fact that they are tied to this offense, which has just not been great. They're not getting enough opportunities down by the goal line. So when you look at these guys, you can say, well, hey, finally Jalen Warren is coming into his own, and that's true. And hopefully a little bit more volume will allow him to take advantage of that efficiency that he has shown, and he'll get us better results. But on the other hand, I think this is probably still going to stay a 60-40 split, because before the game, right before the game, Tomlin told Najee that, or told Jalen Warren that he was going to be kind of the lead back for the week. And, but still the opportunities were almost split down the middle, even at that. I expect that now that he's been officially announced that Jalen Warren is probably going to get more like a 60% split. But I don't think it goes much higher than that. So, I think Najee is now a premium backup who is, really a play away from being a fantastic ad, because if there's no Jalen Warren taking touches from him, all of a sudden Najee Harris is probably a bell cow again. So if anything happens to Jalen, Najee is going to have I think great value. Whereas I don't want to spend too much to try to acquire Jalen Warren, because I'm not sure that he's going to be a ton more valuable than he has been. I still see him at, kind of more in the 10 to 20 fantasy points per game rather than in the 20 plus. I think he'll probably not have any games less than 10 fantasy points anymore in a PPR, but I still don't see him topping 20 very often. So that's it's putting him in a very playable running back, but not necessarily a super valuable running back.
Yeah, I feel like you're trying to fill as many 20-point spots as you can. That's kind of my goal. Like when I'm building these teams in my head every week, if I can average 20 points out of that one slot, I'm pretty happy. But like you said, the game changers are the guys that go above that. I don't think Jalen Warren gives you that. All right, let's go to Minnesota. I mean, we have to go to Minnesota, Dan. You're like our what is that? Like our boots on the ground, inside scooper. You've got connections, Dan. We can't even talk about on air. Let's face it. With those Vikings, Ty Chandler's a guy that, I mean, I think you and I have him on a few rosters. I think you still have him on rosters, and he's the guy. Actually, that's what I was going to say about Warren. The time to buy Warren, because you get the off-season hype, right, with Jalen Warren. We just talked about buy low and sell high. You had the off-season hype coming into the season. Jalen Warren was the hottest thing for a while there. That's not when you buy him, right? That's when you're probably selling him. Then you had a lull where they're just basically splitting it and they're capping each other's upside. That's when you buy Jalen Warren. And now you've either have Jalen Warren and you're using him, or like you said, you go buy Najee Harris, right? Ty Chandler. Yeah. Sorry.
This is also not a terrible time to try to sell Jalen Warren. If you're sitting well at running back and you don't need him for whatever reason, either you've got a team that you're trying to do a rebuild on and you're just trying to collect picks for next year and you just want to sell off assets, or you've got a good stable of running backs and you can afford to use him to shore up some other position. now is probably the perfect time before, the next game even happens. Let everybody get all, they're going to be all hyped up this week about Jaylen Warren being named the starter. That's just going to boost up his value. So now is the week to sell for sure if you can.
What do you think? Late first? Late first?
Oh, I think you might be able to get more than that.
Maybe a piece, like a player and a late first or a mid first type of thing.
Yeah, mid first for sure. I'd be looking for another little piece on there if I could get it. Just something to add a little bit of sweetener on top, without a doubt.
Okay, I like that. And that's kind of like the sneaky move, right? And then
right
now you've got in Minnesota. I mean, we were not really on Madison. Is Ty Chandler like what we were hoping Madison was? And I mean, he's obviously in concussion protocol. Usually it's like they're in and then just they'll miss a game maybe, and he's back. So what are your thoughts on this backfield, kind of bit more long-term-ish and near future right now with Ty Chandler? And I'm referring, Dan, obviously about waiver wire.
Right. So, yeah, if you're in deeper leagues, Chandler's long gone. But if you're in shallower leagues, he might still be out there on the waiver wire. I feel like most people probably grabbed him last week when Cam Akers went down with the Achilles. But if he's out there, definitely grab him. And if you're going to look to trade for him, now is the time. Don't wait until after he's faced that terrible Denver rushing defense because, again, he's liable to get an opportunity to show what he can do. He's not a guy that you want to, put 20 carries a game on or anything like that, but he can handle 20 carries in a game for sure, and he might have to do that versus Denver. Maybe not 20, but something pretty close to that. He's just not, he doesn't have a huge frame, but he does have a lot of juice. Madison basically every time he's been asked to shoulder the load has shown that he just can't handle it. He just struggles to gain yardage because he's not really great at hitting the right hole. He's just he's getting contacted too soon. He gets good yards after contact, and that's about the best I can say for the guy. He gets great yards after contact, but he's just getting contacted too soon. So Chandler's the guy who can get a lot of yards before contact. He might go down a little easier once somebody finally gets to him, but I like that combination a little bit better. So give me Chandler there.
Yeah, in Minnesota, 29th in rush yards per game. So you got to think they can only get better at this point. And I mean, Dobbs is opening it up, right? He's running with the ball. He opens up that game. You got to think for the running back. So Ty's got the opportunity that we talked about. That Jaylen Warren has, it wasn't Jaylen Warren. Who were we talking about with Gibbs? So you got to think that Chandler's going to take, because Chandler's been there now, Dan, for what, 2-3 years now, no?
Yeah, this is his third year.
No. All right. Let's for some reason we love talking running backs on this show, and it's just they just seem to be in the news. We'll talk one more, and then we'll get to a couple questions in the chat. I see you guys drop your questions. I see a couple Dino questions in there in the start sit. We'll get to that. Mr. Kata was a surprise cut today. Supposedly the Jets had like a player only meeting, Dan, and coming out of that was Michael Carter getting waived for some reason. I don't know if there's a connection there or not, but for me, I know Dalvin is definitely a guy. I've got him on a couple FPC, like those type of teams, redraft teams. He hasn't done shit, Dan. He hasn't been good at all. He's kind of a roster clog at this point. But you got to think with Carter. Carter was getting similar reception volume as what Dalvin was getting in Minnesota. So is it just a matter of now Dalvin kind of slides in and takes that role maybe a bit more prominently? For me, especially when we talk about the rookie, Dan, with Izzy, it really depends on Rodgers. Like if Rodgers is back and he needs like a guy that he, has confidence in or trusts, it's probably going to be that guy. And to me, there's a higher chance it's going to be Dalvin than Izzy, depending on, if all else is equal. What are your thoughts on Carter leaving? Does it change anything? Does it affect anything and just your general thoughts on the RBs in New York, and especially Izzy, who's super cheap right now, right?
Right, exactly. It probably just got a little bit more expensive with the Carter news, but still, if he doesn't really do anything in this upcoming game, people go right back to sleeping on him. I think. I would love to believe that this move would free up more targets for Breece Hall, but I'm probably a little too jaded of a fantasy player to actually believe that. So, I'm guessing it's probably going to go to Dalvin, at least in the short term. Dalvin's probably not as bad as the press he's been getting this year, but he's also not as good as what he looked last year. So I think you're probably going to, is it going to make Dalvin any more than a roster clogger? I still don't think so.
Yeah.
The best thing that probably could happen is if Izzy starts getting some run and we see some good things out of him. But this is still a Breece Hall backfield, and that's basically what it comes down to. So, my hope is just that somehow Breece Hall benefits out of this, because I don't think that either Dalvin or Izzy are going to be players you can really count on for the foreseeable future.
Is there a potential landing spot for Carter where he's still relevant, or we just kind of wait and see?
I mean, honestly, the Vikings could use a guy.
True.
His skill set might fit a little bit more uncomfortably close to Ty Chandler, but honestly, that's not the worst thing, because you know what? If Madison just isn't that good, you just use him as your goal line pounder, in a few specialized roles like that. And then, Carter and Chandler, if they were both in the same backfield, they could kind of spell each other, and you could run like a 40-40-20 type of split with those two guys, and then, Madison. I don't know. You could probably also use a guy like that in several other places. Maybe the Rams could use a guy.
I was just waiting for you to finish to say the Rams. Yeah, because Kyron's not back anytime soon, right?
Kyron actually comes back. He should be back in week 12. He's on track to do that. That's the first time he's eligible to come off of IR. He would. I think Michael Carter would also be interesting in a place like Arizona. Helping James Conner shoulder that load a little bit. DeMarcado was a nice little run there for a while, but I don't know how he is long term. I don't know how bad this injury is. So Michael Carter could maybe fit in there. Few other places probably, but I don't see Carter becoming landing somewhere and turning into anything huge. That's probably a little too much to hope.
So if we're looking at RBs, I mean RBs, it's hard, especially with the injuries, Dan, to get that consistency at the position. Who are like one or two of your favorites right now? I feel like Keaton Mitchell could be one of these guys if he just gets a little bit more involved. I talked about Gus Edwards being the RB1 since week 7. So you got to think that he's not going to be shouldering that load, I would imagine, especially with when they see the kind of, home run potential with Mitchell when he gets the ball. You gotta think they're going to get him more involved. Mostert, Dan, interestingly enough, since RB7 since week 5 and RB2 overall this year, Mostert, I know he's a guy that you drafted quite a bit of. I'm happy to have a couple of his shares on some important teams. What are your thoughts on those guys, and who are RBs that you find are that you can count on right now?
Yeah. So first, couple thoughts on Keaton Mitchell and Mostert. Keaton Mitchell really is he looks to me like the Devin Achane of the AFC North.
Hot take.
Yeah, they've just got to get him more touches. He's still not playing that many snaps. Even last week, he played like less than 20 snaps overall. And this is not going to take away a ton from Gus Edwards. Gus is still a finisher that a team like Baltimore needs. I mean, you can't give Keaton Mitchell too many touches, most likely. I know he was a bell cow in college, but he is on the small side, so you probably want to limit the amount of punishment he's taking. So, I think he's a great fit. Him and Gus together are a fantastic fit. I really like that. Mostert, honestly, he was better when Achane was in the lineup than with Achane out of the lineup. Not by a lot, but at least a little bit fantasy-wise. Mostert's been looking pretty good, so don't mind that at all. And I think, as far as running backs you can count on, here's my list. I think it's Christian McCaffrey, Etienne, Eckler, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, and maybe Rashad White, maybe, just due to his role. But I think these are guys that are on teams that are going to feed them enough touches every week and that have offenses that are good enough to get them the touchdowns. And that's what we want to see. Now, Derrick Henry probably is the guy who fits the least on that, him and Rashad White.
I was just going to ask you that.
But on the other hand, I mean, we've seen what Henry does a lot of times once November starts and you start coming down the home stretch and weather starts getting cold and everything. He just turns into a monster. And I'm not willing to bet against him doing that. And most weeks, I mean, a little recency bias says, well, he only scored 3 points last week, but he's been getting around, 18, 19 points most weeks. So, that's not terrible for a running back. That's definitely top 6. So, I think if you can find somebody who's frustrated with Henry and is just looking at his last week and try to make some sort of a trade with him, maybe you can trade off Jaylen Warren and get Derrick Henry. That's a deal I would definitely do.
Yeah, that's exactly the type of move you want to make. That's the sell high, buy low that we're talking about. Player Profiler just tweeted this about an hour ago, Dan. Keaton Mitchell, 177 rush yards and 2 touchdowns on just 10 carries. Like that.
Is that good?
Yeah. Only player in NFL history with 170 plus yards and multiple TDs on their first 10 career carries, Dan.
That's pretty insane. Obviously, that's going to come back to earth some, but still.
Totally.
Yeah, wow.
Totally. Guys that maybe not as dependable, Dan, that you can sell maybe on name value. I have a couple. Pacheco, just the fact that he's in that offense. RB28, Dan, since week 5, just has not been giving you what you want as probably your RB2. And Bijan Robinson, we all know how high he was going. The RB23 right now. I don't know. I don't know if it flips in Atlanta. I think as long as Arthur Smith there, we're all just kind of guessing. So I feel like if you're in a redraft and you're contending, these are 2 names that you can maybe still move and get your your roster kind of better alignment towards that trophy.
Yeah, for sure. I think Saquon's a guy that you can definitely look at moving. The Giants' offense is just a hot mess. Saquon's going to be very involved, but I think he's not going to perform up to what people are expecting. So I would definitely move him if you can on name value. Aaron Jones, another one. Because the whole problem with the Green Bay offense is not only that Jordan Love just really isn't playing well at all. He's throwing a lot of uncatchable balls and everything else, but also this offense just has way too many pieces. Because things are you've got 3 wide receivers, actually 4 now with Dontavian Wicks kind of coming on. You've got 4 wide receivers getting a piece of the pie. You got 2 running backs, and you got a tight end. This is 7 skill players off an offense that's just not producing that many points or that many yards. So, every week it's, you're playing whack-a-mole with these guys. Do I start, Romeo Doubs? Do I start Jaden Reed? Do I start, definitely not Christian Watson.
You're confident starting any of them, right?
Yeah, you're never starting Christian Watson anymore, but, Aaron Jones,
Rest in peace, Dan. Christian Watson.
Jeez. So yeah, I mean things like that. You know, a couple other names. I already said Jalen Warren. You know, you call me crazy, but I think that's a name that if you can sell him for a lot, you don't want to, you don't want to sell him for nothing. But if you can sell him for a lot, that's a move I would make. And you could also think about selling Ezekiel Pollard. I'm sorry, Tony Pollard.
Man, that's yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
I mean, is he a guy that you would maybe buy ROS like rest of the season with Pollard? I feel like, or we just keep holding our breath and not getting anything for it.
Yeah, we keep holding our breath and not getting anything for it. I mean, this is part of the reason why I think the Dak CD Lamb thing works out is because you know what, they're just Dallas is leaning into what's working, and it's not Pollard right now. Pollard over the last 5 weeks is running back 36. It's just terrible. Rico Dowdle is starting to outplay him. Certainly this past week he did, and it's kind of getting to the point where it's I don't know. I mean, I never saw this coming with Pollard. I thought he's not going to be as efficient when he doesn't have Zeke there to absorb some of those touches. But you know what? It's been terrible efficiency. He looks just completely lost right now.
Dan, we got to get to the chat here. We talked about some questions we want to answer. Here's a dynasty trade, 12-team super flex. I talked about sending Dobbs for Tannehill and my 25th late, which it's it'll be like a whatever 212 or 211. So he's sent, or no, actually. So he put Dobbs and a 24 fifth for 24 second and a 24 third. Have O'Connell, would you do it? He's trying to stay in playoff race. So it sounds like he's buying Dobbs here for the second and third, and then he's getting back a fifth with Dobbs.
Yeah, what worries me is he says trying to stay in a playoff race. And that's a steep price to pay if you're trying to stay in a playoff race. You've got Stafford. Let's see, Superflex. Yeah, I don't know. You definitely need a quarterback here. So I don't hate that. I don't love the price.
Dan, here's my problem.
Right.
If you're in Superflex and Dobbs comes in and you're like depending on him, you're probably not a contender. That's you could be.
Right.
But chances are with Stafford, O'Connell, I guess Cousins was good. Stafford, your QB2. I feel like either way, it's not going to hurt you to add Dobbs with those quarterbacks there, right? Because even next year you come in, you still have at least, whatever. I don't think Dobbs is necessarily going to be holding a clipboard behind anyone. Maybe he is, but there's a pretty decent chance that he brings you value at some point. So I don't mind adding him to those quarterbacks, but I would really have to see the rest of that roster just to see how competitive and how you match up to the rest of the league as well.
Yeah, if the rest of your roster is really good, then yeah, I think that you could maybe consider doing something like that.
Maybe let us know, Todd, like where you rank too. Like, are you one of the top teams, or
right?
It sounds like you're kind of in the middle, and you never want to be in the middle. And making this move just keeps you in the middle if you're already in the middle.
Right, exactly. You might be better off just saying, last season, try to turn around and sell a couple pieces instead of buying a couple pieces.
Yeah, maybe you sell Stafford. He should be coming back. O'Connell. I mean, if you can sell O'Connell, go ahead. I don't think he's the future or anything, but I think Stafford is a piece you can probably move if you're not necessarily sure.
Yeah, and weirdly enough, a Baker Mayfield or somebody who is probably going to come a little bit cheaper than what Dobbs is going to come, and I think Mayfield is maybe good enough to help you get by. So
he's 6-4. I mean, it sounds like he's got a pretty decent team, and it looks, just based on his quarterbacks, it seems like he's probably got a stacked team at other positions. So if that's the case, Todd, and you're 6-4, you're one of the higher. Always look at like your points for. If you're one of the top points for in the league, that for me is key. But if you're like middle of the, kind of in the middle range or in the bottom, then don't bother. You're just digging your team, putting it back. I think as opposed to just getting your rebuild started now, right, Dan?
Yep, exactly. And, it's a tough position to be in when a super flex when all of a sudden the quarterbacks just crater on you, which definitely a few teams have found themselves in that position this year for sure. I know I've got one that's, I had Cousins and I had Daniel Jones, and I had high hopes going into the season, and Daniel Jones never really quite worked out, and Cousins was a big bummer too. So, I'm scrambling around trying to piece it together week by week at quarterback right now as well. So, because otherwise the team is great.
So yeah, it's funny, Dan. I have like something where I list all my fantasy pros teams, like just so I can keep track of them, and I name them by the quarterbacks, and like more than half of them don't even have the quarterbacks that they're named on the roster anymore. Between Anthony Richardson, Cousins, all these quarterbacks that I invested in that are just gone right now. It's what a funny year for quarterback though, eh? Like coming in with them going like so high, and then just guys getting hurt, guys not panning out, and then you have CJ Stroud just crushing.
Yeah, I had a $250 buy-in best ball league. I was going into week 8, 9, whenever I lost Cousins. But I had already built up a 200-point lead over the next closest person. Guess who my 3 quarterbacks were?
All guys that are not playing. Let me hear them.
Anthony Richardson, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers.
He comes back. He's going to come back and win it for you.
I have no quarterbacks left in this best ball.
That's dirty.
It is. So like ever since Cousins went out, my lead has been cut in half. I was 200 points up. Now I'm about 100 points up. So, yikes.
So why don't we do this, Dan? Let's talk some kind of cheaper targets for contenders. We're talking about contenders. We already talked about Josh Dobbs, especially Superflex. Matt Stafford, even we just talked about, like he could be, if you're a contender and you need kind of that QB2, QB3 depth, if you lost one of the guys we just talked about, he's not a bad guy to add. At receiver, I mean, with T. Higgins issues, Tyler Boyd is always a nice, cheap depth piece you can add, and he paid off this weekend. Dan, I'm curious to know your thoughts on Noah Brown in Houston, just with I know Nico Collins was injured last game. He should be back. From what I understand, he could be back. What are your thoughts on Noah Brown? Sell high right now, or is he someone you think that's kind of established himself with a really young up and coming quarterback?
Yeah, if you could sell him high, I would definitely do it. I mean, he's not going to be getting 25 fantasy points a game every week going forward. But if you can buy somebody who thinks he's getting anywhere close to that, somebody who's been drinking the CJ Stroud liquor
White Claws.
White Claws, yes. So, but anyway, yeah, if you can, everybody's super high on Stroud and the Houston offense in general, and it's a fantastic story. But, the fact of the matter is you're looking at, Tank Dell and Nico Collins are probably going to be scoring better than Noah Brown more weeks than not. And then you got Robert Woods in there. I think Noah Brown is still a piece that a contender can use. But, yeah, if you can sell him off for, somebody who thinks he's going to continue to stack weeks like he's had the past couple weeks, just go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I feel like those receivers, those wide receiver 3, 4, 5s that give you those pop weeks, especially in that ascending offense, I think is always a good sell because they're replaceable, right? It's all about the opportunity cost.
Mm-hmm.
So JC's another guy I mentioned. James Conner just come back from IR. Kyler's back in Arizona. They look like they're not necessarily going to be throwing the towel in. So you got to think JC still has some left in him coming back off injury in that offense with Kyler back. Maybe if Kyler wasn't back, I wouldn't be as excited. But I just feel like JC being an older running back then that's had injuries, all that kind of stuff, especially coming off injury, I feel you can probably get him pretty cheap and add him as a pretty decent point. One of those guys that can give you those, close to 20 points each week.
Yeah, I think you can. DeAndre Swift might be a guy that you can pick up a little bit cheaper than what he's worth. Mm-hmm. He just hasn't had great touchdown luck. Kenneth Gainwell has bogarted a couple of touchdowns off of him the past couple weeks, and so that's usually a nice spot to pick somebody up. I mean, this is a high-powered offense, and Swift is involved in the passing game as well, so he's not a bad guy to try to buy low. You could also look at like a Jerome Ford, who's quietly kind of coming back on in Cleveland. Kyron Williams will be back soon, so he's somebody you could look at buying. So
I like that.
If a few running back buys that are possible, heck, you might even if you want to go super cheap, you might try Donta Foreman and just hope that he continues to kind of split with Khalil Herbert when he comes back, but I'm a lot less confident in that one.
Javonte Williams, someone mentioned. I know he's coming off of a pretty nice game, but he just looks good. Like he just looks like he's coming off the injury. Like he looks pretty good in that offense.
I agree with that. I worry a little bit that his owner is probably over the moon with what his prospects are going forward. So
not a good time to buy.
Yeah, he might not come super cheap. And
he's one of those guys you should have bought early coming off the injury. But
right, exactly. Rashee Rice at wide receiver, a pretty good buy probably. If you can find anybody who's probably Zay Flowers is a decent buy. I mean, we're not getting the usage that we'd hoped for, but I think his touchdown luck has got to improve at some point. So he's a guy you might be able to get cheap, not in Dynasty, but in redraft for sure.
Yeah, I'm just looking at kind of like the tight end list. Njoku, I know, has a pretty decent schedule coming up. He looks like he's a big part of that offense.
Yeah, Jake Ferguson for sure. Dalton Schultz.
I was going to say Dalton Schultz he's been crushing it, especially if he's on like a non-contender. Dan, he's a nice name to go out and see if you can buy for a second tight end premium or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Looks like we got one more question. Maybe we can sneak that in before.
All right, let's do it. Senor Football, would you trade away Rashad White? I don't know what accent that is, Dan. Would you trade away Rashad White plus Brandon Ayuk for Jonathan Taylor or DeAndre Swift in non-PPR?
I
would just keep White and Ayuk.
I think so. I definitely wouldn't trade him for DeAndre Swift because Rashad White is basically doing what we want DeAndre Swift to do. And Ayuk is a nice piece. I mean, Ayuk is not a league winner or anything like that, but he's a contributing member of a good, solid playoff team. So I like hanging on to Ayuk. If I could get Jonathan Taylor for those two, that would be tempting. But again, you'd have to have a pretty good wide receiver waiting in the wings to take over for Brandon Ayuk to make it worth your while. Otherwise, you might be giving away more points than you're actually putting into your lineup.
I love JT, Dan. One of my favorite players, plays for my Colts. But, I mean, Rashad White, he's been decent, man.
This is non-PPR, so that is a good point.
Oh, that is a very valid point. Yeah, I totally kind of missed that. You are right.
Yeah. So that makes Jonathan Taylor definitely much more appealing. I don't think it really makes DeAndre Swift that much more appealing.
No, I think you nailed it, Dan. I'd do it for JT then. Yeah, I forgot about the non-PPR. Not using non-PPR. Go JT and then not necessarily DeAndre Swift. Senor Football, we appreciate the question. Guys, we appreciate you guys in the chat. You guys have been awesome tonight. It's 10:31. That is our cue. Smash the like button. Smash the subscribe. Make sure you subscribe to the GOAT DiSTRiCT YouTube channel and podcast on your favorite platform. Make sure you join us on there at 12 o'clock Eastern, noon on Thursdays for Thursday Tailgate, where we break down Thursday matchup. And if Dan and I, Dan, if they flash us some cash, maybe we do a 7 o'clock. We'll see what happens. But we appreciate you guys tonight. You guys are awesome as usual. Good luck this weekend. Get those W's. We'll check you all later.
Go DiSTRiCT, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text. That trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT DiSTRiCT, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the and I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.